thanks to 3dprint.com. And we're talking about 3D printed cubesats, 3D printed solid rocket engines, and 3D printed wool. So some very, very different things going on at the moment. And the first one is a very, very peaceful, very, very cute thing that is rather unexpected. So cubesats, small, quite standardized cube satellites meant for universities and high schools even to be able to get in on the space race. They're really cheap. They're really easy to make. They're really low cost. They make optimal use of miniaturization. Very, very powerful devices that can put your college in space, or maybe a sensor platform that's much, much less expensive than it could conceivably be thought of only a few years ago. Now, the idea is because they use miniaturization, because they use the power of Moore's law, these things are going to be better all the time. So they're very, very powerful. And this is the first thing, this is one of these things where you're like, it's completely unknowable and unthinkable until you know it, and then it's the most normal thing in the world. This is work by the Tecnològic de Telecomunicacions de Catalunya, CTTC, University of Luxembourg, and the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya. Sorry about that pronunciation, guys. And they've done a balloon CubeSat for use here on Earth. So what they're doing is they're using CubeSat, the CubeSat architecture. They're using 3D printing to make the CubeSat, as is done often, and they're putting it on a balloon for use on Earth. So the idea is, if there's a disaster area, maybe there's an earthquake somewhere, what they do is to restore internet to the area. They, within an hour and a half, put a balloon with the CubeSat that helps spread the internet. Now, this CubeSat is quite simple. It's based around an Arduino. It's got some quite standard components. It's a 1U CubeSat, and that'll mean that ultimately it's not a very expensive thing. And the idea is that their whole setup is meant to just restore broadband there. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. I think this is a brilliant idea, and it really hopefully will cause people to use CubeSats more and more on balloons. See balloons as a high altitude platform for CubeSats and high altitude platform for low cost sensing. And it's one of these small ideas, or it's not a small idea. It's like one of these ideas that's completely obvious once you've heard about it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. The next thing is Ursa Major. Ursa Major is a rocket startup that has took in a whole bunch of money to make rocket engines and all sorts of things. And now it is focusing on working on the Lynx. And Lynx is a production system for solid rocket motors. But this time, it's not meant to go to space. It's not meant to steer craft in space. No, these are rockets such as the Javelin, the Stinger, the Guided Multiple Launch Rocket System, AMRAAM. Now, the United States of America now has found out in the Russia's aggression against Ukraine, that, of course, it's running out of a lot of rockets. It's running out of a lot of high-end guided missiles. So, peering into the future, and also for now here acutely, it would like to have more missiles. And if it would come to at one point a large-scale confrontation with China or another kind of power on a similar scale, we must realize that there's going to be a lot of targets out there, and making these rockets in the old way is not going to suffice. And Ursa Major is now positioning itself as a solution. Firehawk Aerospace could do something similar, as could a bunch of other players. So maybe this becomes a kind of cottage industry for these guys, or a way to make themselves relevant for the Army and the Air Force and the Navy and the Space Force now. But also, it could be a huge industry. It's very kind of important for the United States to replenish its rocket stocks and to be able to supply allies. So what they're going to do, they're basically going to consolidate parts. They're going to produce these things more rapidly, and also they're going to be able to produce them more flexibly. Their Lynx system, the idea is that it's a more flexible production technology. AMRAAMs in the morning, Javelins in the evening, and Stingers at night. And of course, it could be more automated. And this, of course, is again 3D printing as a warfighting technology, not something we're very, very happy with. But this is significant because it could bring us into very much kinetic people killing things. Even if we don't like those people, maybe this is something. Again, the increased military uses of 3D printing, which we should be aware of. It's very logical for them to do this. It would be very valuable to the U.S. for them to do this, and the pricing of these things, in some cases, mean that 3D printing could perhaps make this viable. Now, again, Firehawk could do the same and may actually, in my mind, be able to do this in a more low-cost way. So that could also be a supplier to the U.S. military. So this is something to watch, because this could be another additional revenue stream to these rocket companies, and it also could be a very, very important thing, because then everyone in the world will, of course, have the same problem and say, we don't want to run out of guided munitions. We can't fight a smart war if we don't have smart munitions. So we're going to put some serious money into these production technologies. And that could mean that we not only expect China to do this, but also other near-peer type countries, and also countries like maybe in the Middle East and stuff like that, that can also see themselves have these kind of solutions. Again, think of a country that could be under embargo for whatever reason. We're seeing a lot of these kind of things form. These countries might very well want to do this production in-house to not be dependent on countries that may decide to, in the case of a certain war they don't agree with, supply them with certain parts. So the next example is, well, it's a lot more cuddly. In all senses of the word. This is Christien Meindertsma, who's an award-winning designer who made a really wonderful book, by the way, about everything that modern society does with pigs and all the parts that break them into. She made a PLA chair previously as well, PLA flax chair. And now she has used a cobalt to 3D print. Now, this is notable for the fact that it's going to be really easy to work with cobalts. A lot of people have been working with cobalts, but a lot of people have been using much bigger robots to 3D print, and a lot of people have really turned to a cobalt as an easily printable platform or printing platform. So she has, and together with a company called TFT, they've essentially made a wool 3D printing robot. It's called the Flocks Wobot, and it builds layers of wool, essentially felting them together. And I happen to have done this a couple of months ago, and felting is actually kind of like to kind of to mush together and pile together and wash together to unify parts of wool. In this case, she says you can make strong and soft devices out of it, and it works with very coarse European wool. What she hopes to do with this, maybe make it for use in end-use objects, but it also make sustainable furniture interior. Now, if you look at couches, even like super expensive couches, they use polyurethane foam. This polyurethane foam is a fire hazard. It's a noxious hazard if it burns, and it's not a very, very sustainable material. This could be, I think, would have to be for the very high end, to be a very sustainable kind of alternative, very sustainable material for the interior of these furnishings, and maybe a very high end one as well. That could really unlock some new markets. What's also notable is that she's talking about Europe, of course, Northern European wool. Interesting thing about that, in a country like the Netherlands, for example, we have quite a lot of sheep that may be used for cheese or for meat and stuff. And a lot of times their wool isn't really harvested or isn't really sold and processed in a very meaningful way. So this may mean that Christien here could have found herself a virtually endless supply of really, really low cost, highly regarded material in the shape of wool. So yeah, could be a really, really smart thing for her, and maybe for the rest of us as well. My name is Joris Peels, and this is another edition of 3D Printing News Unpeeled. Have a great